Hello guys, how's it going? Welcome back to my videos, bringing you guys the best Bloodline tier list of Shindo Life. Now, if you guys enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe, I'll put more. Also, be sure to hit that like button, guys. There's going to be a lot of salty people off this tier list, so you do me a big favor by hitting that like button, guys. Let's get right into the video. Alright, so the Bloodline we're going to be starting off with is going to be Akuma, as always. Now, Akuma is actually going to be in the good tier simply because of the Susanoo and the auto dodge. That is going to be the only reason why it's in good. All the other abilities besides that are just meh, and those two things are going to be the best aspects of Akuma. The next up is going to be Golden Joke. Golden Joke is going to be going into broken because of the damage aspect of it, and also has two iframes. 128 palms is an iframe, and rotation is also an iframe. That means you do not take damage during the ability. Next up is going to be Ashes Storm. Ashes Storm is going to be in really good because of the damage output and the fact that it stuns for a very long time. However, it does have end lag at the end of the third move, which is going to put it lower on this tier list. Next up is going to be Azarashi. Azarashi is actually going to be above Ashes Storm and really good. Azarashi actually got a rework recently that made it really good, especially the third ability of it, and now makes it so they cannot charge chi after you hit them with it, and it is auto tracking. It can literally chase people across the entire Ember arena and even further than that. The range on it is absolutely insane, and it's really good bloodline now. Next up is going to be a Zim Sek. Zim Sek is actually going to be at the top of good. Now, the reason for this is because the Zim Sek, in my personal opinion, the nerfs have hit it way too hard. However, the counter of it is still very insane, but it is on the stun global cooldown now, so just keep that in mind when you're using it. Next up is going to be Bankai. Bankai is going to be above Golden Joke and broken. Now, the reason for this is because Bankai C-Spec actually got a buff, which makes you block break after you use it, and it does drain chi if you do not block break with it. Also, the third ability of it is extremely useful for doing damage and chasing people down. And the second ability of it is one of the best Genjutsu stuns in the entire game. And the auto dodge, there's not much to say about the auto dodge. It's just really good. Next up is going to be Black Shock. Black Shock is actually going to be in the bottom of good. Now, the reason for this is because it has a lot of end lag on a lot of the abilities. And the Z-Spec isn't that good, but the Z-Spec can be used in combos in general. Next up is going to be Bolt. Now, Bolt's actually going to be at the top of good. Now, Bolt would actually be in really good, but actually did get a big nerf recently where the third ability got nerfed. And the stuns actually did get lowered. And the best ability of Bolt was obviously the third ability because it did a crap ton of damage. Next up is going to be Bubble. Bubble's actually going to be at the top of really good. Nothing much has changed about Bubble. It still is a really good bloodline for slowing people, AoE, and things like that. Next up is going to be Clay. Now, Clay is actually going to be at the bottom of really good. Now, the reason for this is because Clay has a bunch of iframes, and the mode only drains 10 at a time. There's not much other to say than that. That's just why it's really good. Next up is going to be Crystal. Now, the first ability of Crystal is actually very good, but the other ability of Crystals are very lackluster, and there's not much to say other than that. The only thing that makes Crystal meh instead of bad is the first ability. Next up is going to be Dongan. Dongan is actually going to be at the bottom of really good. Now, the reason for this is because Dongan actually has a lot of potential in range and stuns and combos in general. However, the stuns do not last long at all, and the auto dodge of Dongan is pretty bad. And the mode leaves much to be desired. Next up is going to be Diosenko. Diosenko is actually going to be at the bottom of broken. Now, Diosenko, in my opinion, the time stop is the best ability of Diosenko, and the auto dodge is also very good. However, the second ability and the C-Spec of it they're not very good to use, but the time stop and auto dodge really does carry Diosenko. Next up is going to be Explosion. Now, Explosion is actually going to be put in bad simply because Explosion got its block break removed on its abilities, which makes it not a very good bloodline anymore. Next up is going to be Forged Akuma. Now, Forged Akuma is actually going to be at the top of really good. Now, I actually did get a nerf recently. It was a hidden nerf. It made the abilities do a lot less damage now, and that's pretty much the only thing that has changed about it. It is still very good for, stunning, messing with people, trolling. Next up is going to be Frostfire. Now, Frostfire is going to be at the bottom of meh. Now, the reason why it's going to be at the bottom of meh and not in bad is simply because it's a passive ability that you can use to counter combos. Other than that, it's not very good, though. Next up is going to be Gold Sand. Now, Gold Sand is actually going to be in the middle of good. Now, the reason for this is because Gold Sand actually did get a buff recently. I don't know if you guys knew that. The first move actually got remade and is now Schizon's first move. It does that much damage and also did get a block break added to it. Next up is going to be Wanziyame. Now, Wanziyame is actually going to be in the middle of really good. It actually did get a huge buff recently. It's been buffed and buffed and buffed to the point where it's actually a really good bloodline to use now. You guys should definitely check this bloodline out. Next up is going to be Ice. Now, Ice is actually going to be at the top of men. Now, the reason for this is because it has a lot of potential in combos. However, the damage output of it is very low, and the cooldowns are very high besides the first ability. However, the first ability is also very useful in combos, which is why it's not bad. Next up is going to be Ink. Ink's actually going to be at the top of bad. Now, Ink definitely needs a rework, guys. It's basically a worse clay when it was meant to be a better clay, and it's pretty rare, all things considered. And it's not very useful at all anymore, so I really hope that this gets a rework eventually. Next up is going to be Apollo Sand. Now, Apollo Sand's going at the top of really good. Apollo Sand is one of the most underrated bloodlines in the entire game. The third ability of it is absolutely ridiculous. You can do crap tons of damage with it. The C-Spec is ludicrous. And the auto attack range on the mode is absolutely insane. Not to mention that the Sand Shower ability is also very good. And the second ability of it is basically a huge AoE stun. You guys really do underestimate Apollo Sand. You need to check it out. Next up is going to be Eternal. Eternal is actually going to be Below Forged Akuma and above Bubble are really good. Now, the reason for this because it's mainly a combo bloodline. It cannot do very much by itself. However, it can still be very good at team fights. It just depends. But mostly what I'm going off for this tier list is going to be competitive and RPG 1v1s. Next up is going to be Joke. Now, Joke is going to be in the middle of good, above Akuma, below Gold Sand. Now, the reason for this is because the damage output of Joke is very low compared to Golden Joke, and it's meant to be a damage-oriented bloodline. Next up is going to be Kokatsu. Now, Kokatsu is going to be at the top of bad. Now, the reason for this is because it does have potential in combos somewhat, but it is a very bad bloodline that needs reworked in the game. Next up is going to be Kaijin. Now, Kaijin, in my opinion, is going to be in good below a Zim Sek and above Gold Sand. Now, the reason for this is because Kaijin, in my personal opinion, even though it did get reworks recently, it did get buffs recently, it's still only a meh. Not really meh, it's a good bloodline. So it's good. It's still good to use. You can win with it. It's very good in combos. However, there are just better bloodlines to use. Next up to be Karada. Now, Karada is actually be at the top of man. The reason for this because it does have iframes and it does have a very good combo ability, which is the hand extend ability, but that's pretty much going to be it for Karada. Next up to be Kenichi. Kenichi's actually be at the bottom or broken. It actually did get it got 2 big nerfs recently where the abilities do not last nearly as long, and they also got a big damage debuff on the abilities. It did get a huge nerf. However, the second mode still carries it with the passive auto dodge. Next up to be Doke. Doke is going to be at the bottom really good. Now, the reason for this is because Doke actually did get nerfed recently, but the damage did get higher. It did get higher damage. However, the stun duration actually got nerfed, which is why it's going to be at the bottom really good instead of higher up on it. Next up is going to be Koncho. Now, Koncho, in my opinion, is probably one of the best bloodlines in the game if you know how to use it right, but simply because of the versatility and how, like, it takes a lot of skill to use properly. But if you know how to use Koncho, you could beat any single bloodline in the game besides Kenichi, because Kenichi uses stamina. But Koncho is without a doubt one of the most busted bloodlines in the game, but I feel like the skill cap is very high, which is why I'm going to be putting it in really good instead of broken. Next up is going to be Lava. This bloodline needs reworked in my opinion. I feel like Lava is one of the worst bloodlines in the entire game. It's supposed to be AoE based, but it doesn't even, it's not even good at AoE in my personal opinion. I feel like this bloodline just needs a huge rework on its abilities again. Next up is going to be Minikami. Now, Minikami, in my opinion, is going to be below Sand and above Dongan. Now, the reason for this is because it's very good, the C-Spec, and the motive is also very good. In the Lizard, you can actually use abilities while you're riding the Lizard. However, the other abilities of it are very lackluster in actual fights, so that's why it's going to be at the bottom really good instead of at the top. Next up is going to be Mud. It's going to be at the top of Broken. Nah, I'm just playing. Worst bloodline in the game. There's not much to say about this. It's mainly for damage. However, it does have one stun move that stuns for like 0.25 seconds, so that's going to be it for Mud. Next up to be Nature. Now, Nature, in my opinion, is actually a pretty good bloodline. I'm going to be putting it at the bottom of good because for a common bloodline, it's actually very good. It has a very good stun and it does pretty good damage. Now, next up is going to be Nectar. Nectar's going to be at the bottom of good. Now, it was meh before the rework of the third ability, but it would actually be in really good if the third ability did not get put on the global cooldown, but it did. Next up to be Okami. Now, Okami's going to be at the top of men. Now, Okami, in my opinion, recently I've been seeing it a bunch. For some reason, I still think it's a very bad bloodline, but I feel like it does have a lot of versatility to it based on the bloodlines below it. Now, next up is going to be Paper. Now, Paper I'm going to be putting at the top of good. Now, Paper does a ton of damage, has a very good stun, and the second ability is actually a ragdoll stun. I don't know if you guys knew that or not. It's a ragdoll stun on a 5-second cooldown, so it's actually very good if you know how to actually use Paper. And the Z-spec of it, it's not very good, but the main abilities of it are very good, and you could equip it in element slots. Next up is going to be Atomic. Atomic's actually be at the bottom are really good. Now, the reason for this is because Atomic does a crap ton of damage if you can stun them. If you guys can stun them, Atomic is one of the best bloodlines in the entire game because of the damage output of it, and it does have a stun if you guys didn't know that. Next up is going to be Ryan Akuma. Now, Ryan Akuma is I'm going to be putting above Koncho, below Eternal. The reason for this is because Ryan, I feel like in my personal opinion, Ryan is just not a very good bloodline. I feel like some of its abilities need reworked to bring it back to the meta. However, it does have some versatility to it, and it does have some uses in an actual fight. Next up to Rengoku. Rip Rengoku, dude. Bottom are really good. They absolutely gutted this bloodline for some reason. I don't really have much to say. It makes me very sad having to do this to Rengoku, my old favorite bloodline, and I really hope they rebuff it so it can go back up on the tier list. Next up is going to be Renshiki. Now, Renshiki is going to make strides today. It went from meh to really good on this tier list because of all the buffs recently to it. The second ability you can use without mode now, which is a huge change, guys. That is absolutely massive because it is an extremely quick, like 60-70k of damage ability that you no longer need the mode for, which makes it absolutely insane for combos. Next up is going to be Riser Akuma. Riser Akuma is going to be at the top of broken. Now, the reason for this is because the third ability actually does steal mode. If you guys did not know that, and the auto dodge of it also stuns at the end of it, which makes it extremely good. And you can charge Chi Dash C-Spec during it. And also, the second ability of it is a stun. It teleports you to them after the stun. However, sometimes it's extremely hard to hit. And the C-Spec is the exact same as Bankai's. Next up is going to be Raikkonen. Now, Raikkonen, in my opinion, is going to be below Apollo Sand and above Forged Akuma on really good. Now, the reason for this is because the C-Spec does an immense amount of damage. You could combo with it very well. It actually did get a buff recently. It does have another mode now, which it can be extremely useful for fighting in general because it's basically a full Susanoo. Next up is going to be Sabrina. Sabrina is actually going to be at the top of good. Now, the reason for this is because Sabrina is a very, very, very good 1v1 bloodline. But other than that, it is very lackluster in actual team fights. Next up is going to be Sand. Now, Sand, in my opinion, is going to be below Joke, above Akuma. Now, the reason for this is because it does have a very good stun, but the other abilities are very garbage, in my opinion. And the Z-Spec of it is basically just an auto dodge, and you can fly with it. Next up is going to be Satori Akuma. Satori Akuma is actually going to be above Forged Akuma, below Raikkonen. It actually did get a bunch of nerfs recently, which makes it not as good as it used to be. The third ability does a lot less damage now. The weapon spec does a lot less damage now. However, it does apparently have a hidden ability that nobody has found yet. So maybe if someone finds this hidden ability, and if it makes it absolutely broken, maybe it would be at the top. Maybe it would beat its own tier. Who knows? Next up would be Scorch. Scorch would be at the top of bad. Now, it's extreme. It can be used in combos, but there's just better bloodlines to use nowadays, and it cannot be equipped in element slots. Next up is going to be Seishin. Now, Seishin, in my personal opinion, is going to be at the top of good. Now, the reason for this is because it has a very good stuns. It has very good damage. However, it does have... I feel like some of the abilities needs to be instant for Seishin to actually make it back to the meta, because right now it gets overshadowed by a lot of the better bloodlines in the game. Next up is going to be Sengoku. Now, Sengoku, I crapped on it a lot, and I'm going to be crapping on it again. I'm going to be putting it below Forge and above Eternal. Second ability of it needs a... Sengoku needs a rework, in my opinion. Sengoku needs a change, and I will keep saying the truth about Sengoku until that change happens, guys. The only good ability is the second ability, and it's still very hard to use in an actual fighting scenario. Next up to be Senko. Now, Senko's going to be below Sabrina, above Paper on good. Now, the reason for this is because Senko does have very good abilities, and it is a Z spec, which also makes it very good because you can equip it in element slots. However, it leaves a lot to be desired, but it is extremely good if you guys can't get a better bloodline. Next up is going to be Shadow. Now, Shadow, in my opinion, is going to be at the top of good, below Paper, and above Bolt. Now, the reason for this is because Shadow, in my personal opinion, it needs a buff. They nerfed it a ton recently. They made it so it has half the stun it used to have, and it just needs buff to be back on top of the normal bloodlines. Next up is going to be Shindai. Now, Shindai, in my opinion, is going to be below Goto Joke and above Diosenko. Now, the reason for this is because Shindai did get a lot of nerfs recently. Shindai is probably one of the most nerfed broken bloodlines in the entire game. No matter how much you nerf Shindai, it'll always be good, guys. It'll always be good. Next up to be Schizon. Now, Schizon is going to be below Raikkonen and above Satori. Now, the reason for this is because the first ability stun actually did get removed. I don't know if you guys knew that. And the same Susanoo change was added to Schizon as it was to Raikkonen. Next up to be Sound. Now, Sound's actually going to be in good, below Kaijin, above Gold Sand. Now, the reason for this is because Sound is a very high damage output bloodline. However, it is extremely hard to set up sometimes, but the damage output may be worth it in some cases. Also, it's very low cooldowns. Next up to be Steam. Now, Steam's actually going to be at the bottom of good. Now, the reason for this is because the Steam dash is basically just a worse Inferno dash, and that's the best ability of Steam. But Steam does have a Fog Dissolution. I don't know if you guys knew that. It does have a Fog Dissolution. Next up to be Storm. Now, Storm, in my opinion, is going to be above Sabrina, below Seishin, because Storm has an immense stun potential, has huge AoE, and is just a very good bloodline to use. Storm is probably one of the single best common bloodlines in the entire game, in my personal opinion, and it's extremely good to use in combos. Next up is going to be Tengoku. Now, Tengoku is going to be... I'm going to be putting Tengoku probably about right here, below Ryan, above Koncho. The reason for this, Tengoku still does a ton of damage. However, the C-Spec nerf is extremely... It's kind of a bummy, I'm not gonna lie. What they did to all these god bloodlines is very bummy. I feel like they need to revert some of the changes they made to balance the game again, because some of the changes were just unnecessary, like Run Goku and Tengoku. Next up is going to be Glacier. Now, Glacier is going to be at the bottom of good. Now, the reason for this is because Glacier's third ability is a very good stun. However, the C-Spec drains Chi absolutely crazy, and the other abilities of Glacier are just not very good, in my personal opinion. And the first ability is very weird. Next up is going to be Inferno. Inferno is actually going to be at the bottom really good. Now, the reason for this is because Inferno Dash is very good. The second ability of Inferno is very good for getting to people and teleporting to people. And the third ability of Inferno is very good for AoE stuns. It's a riser ability, but it only hits once, basically. Inferno, in my opinion, is probably one of the best elemental equipable bloodlines in the entire game, because you can equip with the element slots. It's just very underused at the moment, because right now there's just better things to use in your elemental bloodline slots. Next up is going to be Ryan Rengoku. Ryan Rengoku is going to be at the bottom of broken. Now, I actually did get a ton of nerfs recently. However, it's still very good because of the pull ability. The pull ability is one of the best counters in the entire game to almost any single ability that you could do. And for that reason alone, it's going to stay in broken. Next up is going to be Vine. Now, Vine, in my opinion, because of all the nerfs recently, it's going to be below Asher Storm, above Clay. Now, the reason for this is because Vine, because of all the nerfs, it just hurt the Bloodline an absolute metric ton. And I feel like it may not recover because of that, but it still is extremely good for like trolling people, messing with people, and things like that. Next up is actually going to be Hair. Now, Hair, in my opinion, is going to be at the bottom of broken. Now, the reason because of this is going to be the second ability of Hair. Is a water prison stun, not on the global cooldown. I will keep repeating this until it happens. It needs to be put on the global cooldown, guys. It is a stun, a water prison stun that isn't on the global cooldown when there's abilities that stun for much less that are, guys. It is broken because of that one ability alone, and the C-Spec is still very good for setting up combos. Next up is going to be Light Joker. Now, Light Joker, in my opinion, is going to be below Dioseko, above Kenichi. Now, they actually made a ton of changes to Light Joker, and in my personal opinion, Light Joker is very, very, very good now. It is a very good bloodline now. Now, because of all these changes, they might end up nerfing it in the future, but for now, it is still very good, and it's a very good bloodline to use. I recommend you check it out after all the changes that they made. I'm going to go ahead and do Dark Joker since it's the exact same as Light Joker. I'm going to be putting it above Light Joker simply because it looks cooler. Now, next up is going to be Mecha Spirit. Now, you guys are going to be pleased to hear about this change. Mecha Spirit is now equipable and usable without mode, which is going to put it in really good above Rengoku, below Atomic. Now, the reason for this is because it does have a block breaker, and the second ability of it is a Ragdoll stun. It's basically an auto dodge, but you can Ragdoll someone and set up a combo. And yes, you can use it without mode now, which is absolutely ridiculous, and that's why it's going to stay in really good. Next up is going to be Oded Sabrina. Oded Sabrina, in my opinion, is going to be at the top of really good. It would be in broken, guys, but they actually did nerf it a ton. The clones have been nerfed an absolute metric ton, but they're still very good. Believe it or not, they are still very good. And the second ability still is a block break teleport, which is absolutely ridiculous. Next up is going to be Picaseco. Now, Picaseco, in my opinion, is going to be in really good. Probably above Azarashi, below Bubble. Now, the reason for this is because it is still very good, even with what they did after the showcase. But they actually did buff the third ability recently, which brought its damage back that they actually removed. However, the chakra cost of Picaseco is one of the highest in the entire game. But it still is a very good bloodline to use, guys. It is very good. Now, next up is going to be Snake. Now, Snake, in my opinion, is going to be at the bottom of broken. Snake is... guys, I feel like Snake has a chance to be one of the most broken bloodlines in the game. There's a lot of things that aren't tested yet because it just came out, but Snake has the potential to be one of the single best bloodlines in the entire game. Next is going to be up Giovanni Schizon. Now, Giovanni Schizon is probably going to be a very annoying bloodline to face over the upcoming, upcoming few weeks. I'm going to go ahead and zoom out so you guys can see the entire tier list. Over the upcoming few weeks before they actually make changes to it, it's going to be very annoying to face because it does have an auto dodge stun. And it does have a lot of movement. It has a lot of damage. It's just a very fun bloodline to use as well. And that's why it's going to be at the bottom of broken. Anyways, guys, it's going to actually be it for this video. If you guys enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel for more. And I'll see you in the next one, guys. Bye-bye.